Ooh, the Golden Stallion is here for you, baby. And just coming off, boy, I'll tell you, some serious hotness. You are what you're going to get here. There's some stuff I want to talk about that I don't want to wait until like the next Wednesday Q&A where, I noticed with Patreon, with the Wednesday Q&A, I get to do some shop talk here and there with the patrons, which I consider you to be really executive producers of Sovereign Tech. But I want to get into some of that. But I mean, first, let's just say, yes, this is going to be your review of season 2 of Castlevania on Netflix. And I got to say, knowing that the upcoming season 8, right, of Voltron Legendary Defender, since that show is coming to a close in December, in just about a month, we need a new greatest show on television, or quote unquote on television, whatever that means today. I mean, like, is a Hulu show a television show? Is blah, blah, you know what I mean? Like, how does that work? But as far as, like, what's the new greatest show on TV, with Voltron coming to a close, I got to go with Castlevania. I think that this is this is wild. Of course, it's kind of cart before the horse here in letting you know just how great I thought season 2 was. But really, this is the best show on television, hands down. In fact, I think over time it could best Voltron, just toe to toe, even if they're running at the same time. Wow. And I'll say this outright. We already know we're going to get a season 3. So it's not like I'm talking about something that has to end, and you better believe you're going to get a review of season 3 when that happens, even though I don't think that's going to air until 2019. But that said, I do want to get into some shop talk. And first things first, thank you to everyone, all the patrons that have upgraded to the $5 level you're now a dilettante of the Triple Black Arts, which is actually pretty fitting, perhaps, for what we're going to talk about with a lot of our review of Castlevania Season 2. And look, I'm not just going to say, oh, holy shit, the show is great. Like, there are some really, really wild things about this show that deserve a lot of exploration. Okay, but I want to say thank you to all those that did upgrade actually to the $5 to the $5 reward tier for Sovereign Tech's Patreon. And with that, I asked a lot of you who you got, as part of the $5 reward tier, you get access to the user podcast. And I asked on the Wednesday Q&A, I said, because it wasn't showing up. So I have like a master podcast feed for Patreon that I have access to that should get everything because I'm the creator. Dun, dun, dun. But which one? The creator of Genesis 1 or Genesis 2? Anyway, since I'm the creator, like, I should get everything, and I wasn't seeing, as well as some other people were telling me, they weren't seeing the first episode of the user podcast show up in their feed. And so I didn't know what was going on there. And I looked into it. Some of you said you did get it. Some of you, you responded to my call on the recent Wednesday Q&A, actually, which came out on Thursday. And you told me, that yeah, some of you got it, some of you didn't. Well, I found out that actually, if you just re-enter your Patreon podcast feed into whatever podcast app you're using, it will show up. So if you didn't get it in your podcast feed, that's how you can make it appear. It's just re-entering the podcast feed into your whatever podcast app that you happen to be using, and that'll happen. So just so you know, that putting that out there, I'll probably mention on the Wednesday Q&A, but I want to get that out there, that info out to those, to all of you right away, those that are those that are dilettantes of the Triple Black Arts. Anyway, so there's that. Also, another thing, a lot of people I've got a few people that yesterday, as this will be getting released, the day previous, I had released the second half of Chapter 6 of Emotions of Normal People for Sovereign Tech First University. A quick thing on that. A lot of people are asking me, like already this morning I saw it, where they're saying, hey, like what's the deal with this book? Well, let me tell you. Okay, so now that we're into Chapter 7, this is when the book starts getting really, really meaty and really, really good. I just want to say quickly, so this is a book from the 1920s. It used to be, today now people will just like read a blog post and consider it fact. It used to be that if you were making kind of the scale of human psychology and philosophy that William Moulton Marston is going for with his book, The Emotions of Normal People, or the book Emotions of Normal People, when you're going to that scale, you used to have to start from the beginning. Like you really had to prove yourself kind of from the atom up, okay, ATOM, from the atom up. You couldn't get away with bullshit that like Hans Hermann Hoppe or, some other people pull where like they're really not, they're not starting from like a really serious scientific basis or something like that. You used to have to go really, really, you had to start from the beginning and work your way. So 6 chapters of Emotions of Normal People is, Marston making his case from the atom up, making a very scientific case and using quoting from a lot of other scientists of his day to back up his information and so on. And he's trying to also disprove, he's also doing the great work of, or what used to be considered really, you have to understand, for philosophy to be taken seriously, you had to start from the ground up. There's a reason Ayn Rand, as good as, small o objectivism may be in some cases, okay, or, some of these other guys that libertarians really look up to, as interesting or logical as what some of them may claim is, they never get taken seriously in philosophical circles, not because they're anarchists. Anarchists get fully taken seriously in philosophical circles. They really, really do. The thing is that a lot of them, like Rothbard and so on, they don't start from the ground up. Okay. They take certain things, on, well, I don't want to say on faith, but as fact, as this is how it is. But they never really build from the ground up, and they don't. And when you read actual, like more, I don't want to say more serious, because I'm not saying they're not serious, but when you read more serious philosophical texts, they have, like, even if you read John Locke or some of these other guys, they have to start from like the very beginning. That's why these books were always so huge back in the day. Okay. It was because they had to start from the atom up. Okay. Just like with User Podcast. With User Podcast, I'm starting from the beginning of the universe. Granted, it's an abridged version and I'm not like getting into all of the detail and I'm not exactly starting from the atom up, but I am coming more from a position of time. And in that, you got to start from the beginning, or was there even a beginning of time, right? Like that's where it has to go. So, it's important to start from there and then, make your case building up from that. So the first 6 chapters of Emotions of Normal People is Marston doing it the old fashioned way, and the way that you get taken seriously. Now, he still never necessarily got taken seriously. In fact, his work just ended up getting bastardized. But regardless, that's, if you're wondering, like, why, boy, the first 6 chapters, they seem kind of boring or not as exciting as the introduction was, or that, like, wow, it's so technical, blah, blah, blah. Well, you had to do that. To be respected in academic circles, that's how you used to have to do things. Okay, there's a reason that, for example, that Max Stirner is taken completely seriously and widely respected and regarded. People might think that they're debunking him, right? Other philosophers might think they're debunking him, but he gets taken seriously because his texts start from the beginning, start from the atom, and work their way up. Okay, so that's the deal with the first 6 chapters. But now that Marston has made his case, when you get into chapter 7 of Emotions of Normal People, now it really takes off, and you're talking about the application of the science that he is laying out. So if you're wondering, wow, this seems kind of boring, like, are you really going to go through this whole thing? Yeah, well, now is when it gets really good. So keep that in mind. Now, last bit of business, since we're talking entertainment here, since this is your review of season 2 of Castlevania. I heard news the other day that just blew my fucking mind, and I am not okay with this, and I'm going to tell it to you here. So supposedly, now look, my favorite director is Ridley Scott. Okay, actually, my favorite director is Paul W.S. Anderson, who has honestly done a lot of side work to Ridley Scott's classics. For example, he did Soldier, which is a side quill, if you will, to Blade Runner. He's done a lot of stuff. The guy just doesn't get the respect he deserves, even though he does do stinkers. I admit to that. But a lot of his movies are just, I think they're tremendous. So anyway, but otherwise, usually I like to say, just so that nobody gets confused, all right, who's your favorite director? I'll just say Ridley Scott. I'll just come out and say it. And this guy has been so prolific, continually prolific. And he's pushing 80. Like, it's pretty amazing. Anyway, it was announced that he is going to be making Gladiator 2. Yeah, the sequel to Gladiator. Honestly, so here's the thing, is that now you ask me the question, well, hey, Stallion, what's your favorite movie of all time? Well, my favorite movie of all time is Gladiator. So I love Gladiator. I mean, I say it without reservation that it's my favorite movie of all time. I don't want this. I don't want this sequel at all. There's no point to this. This is downright stupid. Are there ways that this could be done that could make it good? Really, the only way that this movie could be any good. So there's two theories running as far as what it could be about. One is that it's actually about, who's it, Lucretia's son or whatever, or not Lucretia, Lucilla, right? Lucilla, the brother to Commodus, or I mean, the sister to Commodus. Oh shit. Anyway, Lucilla, like her son, was Lucius Verus. It'd be about him growing up and I don't know, I guess maybe becoming a gladiator or something. Whatever. I don't want to see that movie because that sounds like it would just hit all the same beats as the original Gladiator, and I don't need that. I need something fresh because the movie Gladiator was just so fresh. I mean, there's a reason that it's considered such a classic by just about everybody. The other one is supposedly there was a script that had been going around about a decade ago that had to do with somehow Maximus coming back to life. Russell Crowe's character Maximus coming back to life. I'd kind of watch that, but that, I don't know, that gets into all kinds of realms of strange, right? I don't want this. I think this is ridiculous. Like it's just straight up, just flat out ridiculous. And then pretty much I think in the same day they announced that Bad Boys 3 would be coming out. I don't give a rat's ass about that either. That's just not my kind of film. So anyway, I don't have really anything else to add on that, but just no to Gladiator 2. But yes to Castlevania Season 2, baby. And of course, yes to what we now know is already going to be Castlevania Season 3. I imagine, as far as I've heard anecdotally, most people watch Season 2 of Castlevania, like they watched the entire damn thing. It was only 8 episodes, but they watched the entire thing like in one day. I mean, they just jumped on it. And I think so many people were excited about this. I mean, this is really, really white hot stuff. And the Castlevania series, which started way back in 1986, on the NES or on the NES, is well deserving. I mean, like this is, it's a legendary video game series, and for fuck's sake, it deserves a legendary animated series or TV series. Might as well just call it a TV series. Fuck the fact that it's animated. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's swearing right and left. It's gory as hell. There's jokes about penises and everything in it. I mean, literally jokes about penises in it. There is no reason to just like talk about this as an animated series. This is as adult and as serious as a heart attack. Now, I will warn spoiler alerts because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be talked about that you can't do without spoilers, I think. So spoiler alerts ahoy in this one. But, that said, wow. So this picks up right after season 1, which was a very short season, only 3-4 episodes. And I mean, it was pretty much like watching a movie more or less. And again, this had 8 episodes of fuller season, and so much happens inside of those 8 episodes. But this is definitely like season 1 gave us great setup, and season 2 was able to just run with it, and it didn't waste any time. I want to say like the first 3 or 4 episodes are a little on the slow and more methodical side. Okay. But then, you hit episode 5 and into episode 8, and it just hits the ground running like that's when it really does. And it's just action packed, and tremendous, beautifully animated action. I mean, and the animation once again is stunning. I felt like there were certain points where the detail was a little less than what season 1 had, but it still looked phenomenal. Like, I mean, it's really it's gorgeous animation, even though the only thing I don't like is as far as the animation goes, Trevor Belmont, kind of our main character, even though really you have 3 main characters. Of course, this is very much the story. I mean, you have Dracula, who's the villain and certainly a main character, but then you have Alucard, you have Sypha, and Trevor Belmont, who, well, we'll talk more about that in a minute. Anyway, so Trevor Belmont, like his scruff or his like half beard, it's just these weird squiggles, and I don't know, it feels like it cheapens what you're seeing. You know, like it works, it gets the point across, but then at the same time, I don't know. I don't like it. It throws me off when I see it. It really does. But of course, this season did not just concentrate on Trevor Belmont as much as perhaps season 1 did. If anything, I felt like the character of Sypha, that she was really the hero and main character in this story, and she was also the one very much forwarding the narrative. And I couldn't be happier about it, you know. The character of Sypha in the general Castlevania series has appeared at various points. Now, of course, they've pretty much been running with this. This is it's definitely a play on Castlevania 3 as far as like what video game is, what, you know, which Castlevania games is based off of. It's definitely based off of, or definitely Castlevania 3. You're getting sprinkles of Symphony of the Night in there. So which Castlevania 3 and Symphony of the Night are considered two of the greatest games in the Castlevania series, if not the greatest. And, you know, maybe like with Castlevania 3 or Symphony of the Night. And then also now we're getting in some sprinklings in of was it Lament of Innocence, the PlayStation 2 game for that it was kind of the first PlayStation 2 game of Castlevania, and that's a tremendous game. I mean, just a brilliant fucking game. So they're basing it absolutely on three of the greats. They really are, and I couldn't be happier about that. But Sypha would appear in various points within some of these games. She would even be in she was in Mirror of Fate and so on, and Judgment. And so you kind of get different stories of what role she plays, but she does. I mean, generally the idea with Sypha is that she is the love interest of Trevor Belmont, and she does marry him, and she is the mother of Simon Belmont. And, of course, Trevor's the father of Simon Belmont, who would end up being, you know, the protagonist of Castlevania 1 and maybe the most well-known, and of course, Castlevania 2 and so on, would be the most well-known Belmont of the bunch. And again, kind of the originator of in the Castlevania series. So, and you definitely get in season 2, you get to see the starts of the love interest, and of course towards the end of the season, it's very explicit. The love interest between Trevor and Sypha, and it's really well done. I love it, and again, they really give Sypha center stage throughout this whole thing, and she really has some of the best quotes throughout. So anyway, this ends up being, you know, Dracula is continuing his campaign after the death of his wife. Being killed by the church, you know, by the Inquisition, effectively. And he is going on the attack, and he wants to wipe out every human out there. Now, he isn't exactly telling his vampire brethren that he plans on killing all humans, and that actually, you know, I mean, well, he does tell them that he plans on genocide, but he doesn't tell them that, you know, this does, like, he claims, oh, I've got stores of blood that you're going to be able to live off of, and animals and everything. He doesn't explain to them that, you know, you're all just going to die off. And it's pretty much Dracula is going on a scorched earth policy. Not that just every human's going to die, but also every vampire will die thereafter, you know, in short order. Even though he does have a couple of Forge Masters, which are interesting characters to bring in, there's Hector, and then the other one is, Godbrand is hilarious. I mean, what a great fucking character. But Hector and Isaac are the two Forge Masters who are humans, which it seems like he's saying they're going to be allowed to continue to live on. But anyway, none of that necessarily matters. I think even a lot of the overall storyline doesn't really matter, even though it's very well done. And like the interaction between Dracula and the other vampires, including the entrance of the character Carmilla, who is probably going to be the villain going forward because she survives this season 2, as to where, spoiler alert, Dracula does not, at least not in this sense. Is Dracula going to come back? Well, that's a whole other can of worms. But they don't really give you any hint of that sort of thing within this. But Carmilla is there. I mean, and just hilarious banter between all of these characters, all the vampires anyway, and it's all amazingly most of it's happening within Dracula's castle itself, which is impressive because it's really just interplay on a very, very small stage, effectively. Because they don't spend a whole ton of time like really traversing the earth. You know, they're not even going around Wallachia much, and they end up going to another area anyway, because of course Dracula's castle can move. It can transport itself using this engine. Okay, not necessarily. It doesn't appear that it uses magic. It uses some kind of science to where it can move. And there's the discovery of the Belmont Legacy, or the Belmont Library, that you know has all of this wild, all of the collected knowledge of the Belmont, the generations of Belmont heritage and everything, and that was really wild. And then of course, well, anyway, it ends off with. Yeah, Dracula gets killed. I mean, because there's so much more to talk about. The story isn't even the big deal, even though, like I said, it's well done. The action, tremendous. Like Alucard, who's the son of Dracula and his now dead wife. So he's like half human, and he's a vampire, but he can actually he can be exposed to the sun and all this. But like he has that really cool sword that he sort of just has like float around him that he doesn't even really hold. And I mean, there's so many cool. Like Alucard is such a great character. There is so much humor in this. In fact, it's written by Warren Ellis, of course, the legendary Warren Ellis, and you really get his flavor throughout this whole thing. It is so damned funny, darkly funny at points, and also, as I said before, it is adult funny. Like, this is undoubtedly not a kid show, like not even close. Okay, it is unabashedly adult, and it is just well done. Warren Ellis writes like no other, and the humor lands every time. It is always funny when the jokes drop. Like Alucard is sort of like darkly kind of emo humorous in a way, and just always so calm. He never really yells or anything. He just has that really kind of plotting voice that is both sexy and can also be very funny and serious at the same time, and also sad and tragic. And there in episode 7, when you get to that, there's some very tragic shit, like when Dracula is, and that's something else I like too. So I'm going to talk about the end in a second here, but I like that pretty much the storyline comes to an end in episode 7, or the main crux, the climax hits in episode 7 with the death of Dracula. I mean, and there's just this really tear-jerking moment when Dracula, he's fighting Alucard, and he's about to kill his own son. And then the fight ends up in the part of the Dracula's castle where it was Alucard's room when he was growing up. And Dracula just has a moment and just like stops and just cries and says, "Oh my God, I'm going to kill my own son." And when he's like, "What am I doing?" and blah, blah, blah. And of course, Alucard ends up killing him. And of course, the claim is that, look, my father died when my mother died. Like my father's been dead for a long time. In reality, and it's really, really powerful stuff. And that's, I think to make the claim that something is the greatest at any given point, the greatest TV show or greatest movie or something like that, I really think to make that claim, it has to be something that explores every emotion within the human condition. Every aspect of the human condition has to be there. And this has it. There are just, where you want to cry too. You want to laugh. It's got it all, and there's points where it's downright sexy, and it is sexy. You don't exactly get sex, but it's hot. It's really, really hot. And there's some great, there's also a lot of, great callbacks and flashbacks as well that expand upon the story overall that we sort of would get hinted at within season 1. You get to learn a lot more about Dracula's wife and Alucard's mother, which is interesting. So anyway, all of this ends off. What I was saying was really great about this is that season 7 gives you the climax, episode 7 gives you the climax, and then episode 8 is kind of an aftermath, sort of a epilogue to it, and I love having that. Because I think the average animated series or even TV show would just end, or movie would end with, okay, they kill Dracula and then it's over, and maybe the heroes go off into the sunset. No, we get a whole episode of epilogue of what's going to come next, or what happens to these characters after the fact, and so on. And it's beautiful. I think that's brilliant to have that. The only other show what I think actually, okay. So the real greatest episode greatest show in television history is Babylon 5. I've been saying that for years. My opinion has not changed on that, and nor could I ever imagine it changing. But that's the show that did that as well, where it had a real epilogue. In fact, it had a couple of them, not just one. You got to do okay, Earth and the shadows and everything. All that's all the enemies get held back or defeated or whatever, and chased off. What happens after the fact? You really got that within Babylon 5 itself. I don't mean the sequel show Crusade or any of the movies. I mean, you really got that self-contained within the series itself, and it was really well done. Maybe that's what tipped me off to the concept of a television series having an epilogue where you get to see what happens after, and I just think that that's so important. It's something that we always wanted, honestly, with Star Wars. With Return of the Jedi, we don't really get an epilogue, until back in the day, in the 90s, until we got the Timothy Zahn books. And even that wasn't really an epilogue. You wanted that. What happens with these characters now? What do they do? Do they start building the New Republic? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, eventually you'd get it, and now we kind of have it. But, I mean, even with Disney's, with what Disney is doing, we still don't exactly get it. I don't know. Anyway, this isn't about Star Wars. So, yeah, that episode 8 of this season is supremely well done and so important, and it's calm. There's no real there's some action to it that you get, but there's not like crazy amounts of action or anything, and it's just a calm exploration of where are these characters going to go? Where are they going? And honestly, you could have stopped with this. You could have stopped. Season 2 could have just ended it, and we would have had this beautiful little TV series called Castlevania that we could, rewatch going into the future. But to have a season 3 is fantastic. Anyway, so season 2 ends with pretty much Alucard, because Sypha, to defeat Dracula, they realize, hey, we have to trap the castle. We can't let Dracula's castle get away and transport away. And so she brings it. She learns within the Belmont Library how she learns various magics and whatnot to be able to actually trap and lock down the castle. And she does so by bringing it right to the Belmont Library, and she puts it right on top of it. And this is really cool because after Dracula dies, so Alucard inherits Dracula's castle, which has all of his scientific knowledge in it. But then also, Trevor Belmont says, you also, I bequeath you the Belmont lands, which includes underneath the castle now, the Belmont Library, which has all of this magic and all this other wild knowledge within it. And so, and in fact, this is going to get into what I really want to talk about with this show. Trevor says, you get both of these, as above, so below. That's the exact quote that he gives within that, talking about, as above in Dracula's castle, so below, and he's referencing the Belmont Library, and that this is the culmination of knowledge, science and magic, which is a wild concept to lay out there that I think most people, even adults that would watch this, they wouldn't grasp what's being laid out in this. Okay, but it's really, that's really cool. I can't wait for season 3. I want more of whatever the fuck Alucard is going to discover, and, what is the culmination of this combination of of Dracula's legacy and the Belmont legacy as far as, just, the books and all that knowledge. That's incredible. It's such a wild thing to explore. And this show is not afraid to explore the occult, or black magic, or more wilder aspects of science, shall we say. And this is something I talked about. If you listen to the season 1 review that I did of Castlevania, I said somebody's really, really got their finger on the pulse, shall we say, as far as now Adi Shankar, who did the show, I think this guy's brilliant. I feel a kinship, instantaneous kinship with Adi Shankar and the work that he does, because a lot of it really feels like if I were in charge of these franchises, it's exactly what I would do. And I mean, with everything that he does, a lot of it really feels like he gets my style in a very real sense. I might be a little more corny or cheesy in what I would create, But I really think he gets it. Adi Shankar is just brilliant. Now, I don't know if it's him or if it's Warren Ellis that is really laying out a lot of the more, shall we say, magical aspects within this. And it wouldn't surprise me because Warren Ellis, of course, is best known as a comic book writer. I mean, he is also a screenwriter, obviously, but he's done some of the really, really big stuff. Transmetropolitan, Global Frequency, and so on. Now, a lot of comic book writers, not a lot, but a lot of the big ones, consider themselves to literally be, and I want to be careful when I talk about this, consider themselves to literally be magicians. Okay, I don't know if I've ever heard that Warren Ellis considers himself that. But you could take Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, like these guys they genuinely consider themselves to be magicians of a type, or I guess maybe they would want to call themselves adepts, okay, based upon whatever, school they happen to be practicing. And this goes to some wild places. And they're not joking. Like Grant Morrison considers some of his comic book series to be genuine sigils. Like they are magic sigils that he's put out into the world. Alan Moore has literally put a curse on anything Watchmen, like the movie Watchmen. He put a curse on that. That's how. Now, I'm not saying that like there is an actual curse on the movie, but I am telling you that these guys really believe this shit. And they're really into it. And I am intrigued. I don't know if it's Adi Shankar or if it's Warren Ellis, because he is the writer, that is lacing Castlevania with some pretty high-level stuff as far as magic goes. Black magic, whatever. But someone is. And this is I don't talk about this much, so I don't know how far I want to go with this. But wow. It's right on. This is not stuff that you'd necessarily like read in a book somewhere. This is not your Harry Potter bullshit. Or I'm not saying Harry Potter's bullshit. I get why people like it. This is not, your regular Hollywood, aspects of magic. Like there's some really high level occult stuff being laid out in this. And I think it's great. Like I love it. I'm glad that it's there. But that said, when you read occult works, one of the things you learn is that if you know this sort of stuff, you don't talk about it. And someone's playing with fire here. I feel like, because I think they're breaking their own rule in that they are telling people about this stuff. It's very odd. But there's so much in this. In fact, you get constant references to Enochian magic. That is when they're going through the, a lot of the series, or a lot of the season 2, when they're going through the Belmont Library, Sypha, she's constantly talking about Enochian magic. Then she starts talking about the Adamic language, which is in reference to Adam, and she says it explicitly that this, because Alucard says, "I've never heard of this Adamic. What's Adamic? What does that mean?" And she says it's the original language spoken by Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It's the language that God eliminated at the, Tower of Babel to keep humanity from cooperating and working with each other. Now, Sypha is part of a order of monks called the Speakers. Now, at first, when you hear monks, you instantly think that somehow, they're like worshipers of God or something like, they're Christian in some sense. Not at all. In fact, again, this is very explicit stuff. In fact, I've almost never heard anything like this in any medium of entertainment. That's part of what I'm saying. This is so shocking when I watch this and I go, whoa, somebody, like I said, somebody's playing with fire here. But she, there's a point where I forget exactly what the situation is when they're in the Belmont Library, but Sypha says, oh yeah, we're the Speakers, which is her order, the order of monks that she belongs to. She says the Speakers are the enemy of God. That's exactly what she says. The Speakers are the enemy of God. She says we live in cooperation and hide our stories inside ourselves, so he cannot strike them down in jealousy. And then like something happens within the library and like it's getting attacked by some of Dracula's forces, and she instantly goes, "See, God hates me." And it's amazing that's almost very Gnostic, where the idea that there's this demiurge, that there's this God who actually created the earth, and that God is the enemy, right? I mean, it's sort of getting into that, but clearly Sypha is not Gnostic, okay? Because, and you know that because she ends up, first off, she falls in love with Trevor, and it's not clear that they have sex or that they kissed, but, you know, if she's going to be the mother of Simon Belmont, well, they have to have sex. And, you know, Gnosticism has a asceticism to it. Like they don't give into the carnal pleasures of life. So, you know, she's not a Gnostic, but she's clearly laying out some really, what would be called misotheism. Okay. So she's a misotheist, which means that she, you know, like, kind of like a misanthrope where you hate humanity. Well, there's such a thing as misotheism. It's rare. It's not something talked about a lot. In fact, the only other time I think it's ever discussed much in entertainment would be more with like the Klingons in Star Trek, right? Because the Klingons talk about how their gods were too much trouble and so they killed them. So they're misotheists. They hate their gods. And a misotheist, you know, hates God. And it would appear, I mean, if you're saying you're the enemy of God, well, then the speakers are misotheists. And that's the thing with the speakers. And that's another theme that goes on throughout this series is that the speakers, they don't write anything down and they just tell it to each other. And again, this is so that way God, you know, I guess can't strike them down in jealousy over their stories or something, or over what they are achieving, because she specifically says, you know, we live in cooperation and hide our stories. So they live in cooperation, and she's saying that, you know, at the Tower of Babel, God kept humanity from living in cooperation out of some kind of jealousy, which I've brought this point up before. I've talked about this with the Tower of Babel. It's a very weird bit of scripture because it sounds like God is afraid. Because he whoever he's talking to in that chapter in Genesis, was it like chapter 12 or whatever, or maybe chapter 11? I think it's chapter 12. When whoever he's talking to, the angels, whoever it happens to be, or some kind of galactic council like there is in the book of Job, God's saying it's like if we don't confuse their language, if we don't do something, they're going to be able to do anything. And he's talking about the humans. Humans are going to be able to do anything, and it smacks of fear. It's very strange when you read it. And I mean, it's one of the things that when I was younger, when I read it, and like I read it with kind of a more critical eye that I was developing thanks to Harlan Ellison, you know, I go, whoa, wait a minute. That's like, how could God be afraid? Like this doesn't make any fucking sense. And so clearly the speakers are, you know, kind of an antidote to that, to where they live in cooperation, but they don't, you know, they don't write anything down, and they don't make it so that way, I guess, somehow God can know what they're doing and what they're kind of developing and everything. But Sypha constantly brings up, she says she thinks it's a failing that her people, that the speakers, have not written things down. They should be writing things down because that allows you to build something even greater, or get like she does throughout season 2 of Castlevania, where she gets to, you know, learn new spells and all this various magic and everything, and build on top of it, on top of, you know, effectively the shoulders of giants, you know, that being the Belmont legacy. And, you know, and she gets to do all these spells and everything, and she's realizing the advantage. Well, if you write it down, you know, other people get to access it and build on top of it, which is, you know, anyway, wild stuff. Okay. In fact, it's pretty funny. I mentioned earlier how there's jokes about penises. There's a funny point where she's reading through all these books in the gigantic Belmont library. And there's a point where she's talking to Alucard, and she's like, I do have questions about Trevor's ancestors. I discovered an entire box of spells about penises. And it's just, there's lots of little jokes like that little jabs that keep going on. But, you know, speaking of the magic, I mean, there's a point where, and this might be one of the most succinct and best descriptions of what magic, whether you believe it in or not, what it's supposed to really be, what it's really about. And, you know, Sypha is talking about how she's going to intend for Dracula's castle to appear before them. And she's going to transport it there and lock it down, right? Keeping its engine from allowing it to transport to another part of the earth. And she says to, you know, and Alucard says something, you're going to intend? And she gives this quote. She says, that's all magic is, Alucard. Changing things in accordance with my intent. Bam. Now, understanding that that is some really, that is really high level shit. That and the quotes about God is some really high level shit as far as, concepts of magic, or what sometimes get called black magic, goes. Now, most people that actually, would practice or believe in black magic, or if you read a lot of, classic texts on the matter, it does seem pretty clear that in many ways you're actually talking about a science. Or science of some kind that people didn't realize would actually just end up being science, and they just confused it with magic and so on. I talked about a lot of this in my season 1 review of Castlevania. I do recommend that you listen back to that. But yeah, again, there's some really, really, I know I keep saying it, but there's some high level shit being described in this show that I can't believe is actually being said or described in anything, in any medium whatsoever. And you could say that it's all very basic and you've heard it elsewhere. I don't think so. I don't know where, outside of something that's just trying to be Satanist, and this is not trying to be Satanist. The speakers are not describing themselves as Satanist at all. I don't know many things where you're like openly hearing a character talking about intent, and talking about how being an enemy of God, and, like believing there is a God, but that you're actually the enemy of it. I mean, like, woo. I mean, this is wild shit. And then to get into, like the concept of the Adamic language, which this is not like a new idea, nor is it an original idea within Castlevania. You have what's called the language of the birds, which is or also known as the language of angels, which is widely considered like the original language, or, within some of these like kind of very, very, very theoretical and fanciful texts over the years, and that you've heard talked about within, Kabbalah and some other schools. And the language of the birds is also apparently what the angels speak. Of course, they conversed with Adam and Eve, if you believe the story of Genesis. And, maybe look at some of the little bit of extraneous material, or some of what the Bible actually hints at happening within the Garden of Eden. But, that's an important thing to bring up, because we talked about this with the User podcast. The Adam and Eve story within Judaism itself, okay, or not within Judaism, within Torah, within the Old Testament, okay, whatever you want to call it, within the Bible, just don't call it the Hebrew Bible, it's insulting. Within the Bible, if you think the New Testament is valid, call it the Christian Bible, don't call it the Bible. Within that, like, it's rarely ever talked about. Like the whole Adam and Eve and a lot of the creation story, it's rarely ever talked about. That's part of why in the User podcast, that I was bringing up, this is a very odd story. But Kabbalah and some other, I guess you could say, texts outside of which, granted, the idea of the speakers is very much sounds a lot like the oral Torah, right? Where you don't write it down, you just share it through the priesthood and you pass it down through time until eventually, of course, Rabbinic Judaism did write down the oral Torah, the Mishnah and so on. But when you get into some other traditions based within or on Judaism, then yeah, you start to find out about this whole, a lot of these wilder ideas of like an Adamic language or Enochian magic, right? Of course, the character of Enoch from the Book of Enoch, and so on. So there is a lot here. There are a lot of things being said. There is a lot of, I don't want to say truth, but for some people, what is considered truth is getting laced within this. That I have, with all of these shows and, animated or otherwise that you think of where, they dalliance with magic, or magic might even be kind of the central aspect of it and so on. None of them have, shall we say, cut to the quick or cut to the chase, perhaps. Both of those statements, they're two different statements, but they're both true. As this show has, in my opinion. You get some things, you get Yu-Gi-Oh! That deals with a lot of Egyptian magic and stuff like this, but this is like going right to the fucking core. It's wasting no time and is laying out some very, I almost have to believe it's Warren Ellis. And again, it wouldn't be surprising because, like I said, many comic book writers, are firmly into the occult, and they are magicians. And I say that with respect. I don't say that as an insult or as like, I'm not holding up a cross here saying, go away from me, Satan, or something like that. It's ridiculous. No, come here, Satan, please. Hi, Dad. So, a lot to take in with Castlevania Season 2. There's tremendous action. The music, oh, fuck. Trevor Morris. I thought the music was fine in Season 1. he took it to a whole new level in season 2. And in fact, he brings in a lot of very classic themes throughout Castlevania's video game history. And I was very pleased by that. And it's very emotional. It's super well done. Trevor Morris knocked it out of the park. Music-wise, I was just wholly impressed with that. I want a soundtrack yesterday for this. I want it now, just like I do for Voltron Legendary Defender. I want the fucking soundtrack for this. I don't know if it's on Spotify. I'm going to have to do a YouTube search and see if I can find it, because that's what I had to do. I hate this. So a lot of people are releasing music on Spotify, and they're not actually releasing an album at all that you can buy, even though it comes together as an album on Spotify. That does not help me. I want to own it, goddammit. Okay, I want to put it on my NAS and have it accessible through all my different devices. So I need to see if perhaps they did that with Castlevania. I haven't looked into it, but that's what I had to do with Voltron Legendary Defender. Is somebody fortunately ripped it from Spotify, ripped the soundtrack of Legendary Defender from Spotify and put it up on YouTube, and then of course I ripped that. So I might have to do that, see if they have it for Castlevania, because the music is just epic as fucking shit and heart-wrenching at points. It hits all the notes, no pun intended. And Trevor Morris just really, really killed it with that. And the voice acting, I mean, the voice actors are just second to none. In fact, I'll tell you, I fucking love the woman who's doing Sypha, Alejandra Reynoso. I don't know if I pronounced her name exactly right, but she's like that accent. It's almost like Russian and Spanish at the same time. Like it's this really unique accent, and I think it's so sexy. Oh, it's so fucking hot, that accent. So I love that, and of course Richard Armitage, does a great job as Trevor Belmont. I mean, James Callis is Alucard, phenomenal. Graham McTavish is Dracula. I mean, everybody involved, even Matt Frewer. I mean, everybody involved is doing phenomenal. Like, this is great voice acting. Some of the best voice acting I think that's ever been done. I would love if in season 3, if they could get Sam Witwer to do a voice on this, I would be beyond pleased. Because I think, well, first off, I think Sam Witwer is one of, like, I worship Sam Witwer. Okay. So many people think I hate men. No, I love Sam Witwer. Like, I love him like that. Oh, fuck, he's so goddamn hot. And he is the man. Anyway, I'd love for him to get in on season 3, because he's a tremendous voice actor. Of course, most people, may know him. He does the voice of Maul in the various animated Star Wars series, and he will do Emperor Palpatine or Darth Sidious, depending on what you're talking about, at various points when he is needed. And he does a tremendous job of that. And Sam Witwer is just phenomenal. So anyway, season 3, very excited for it. I don't know what's going to come of it. I don't know, what we're going to get in it. I hope Warren Ellis is still on board. I haven't exactly heard that news yet, but whoever is lacing in the quote unquote black magic into this, wow. I within your own circles, I fear for you, but keep laying it out, man, because you're laying out some heavy shit. I mean, really, really heavy shit that people don't even realize, and I can't even, I'm not even necessarily feeling the most comfortable describing. I know a lot of people have asked me for, like, speaking of Enochian magic, a lot of people have asked me. I recorded an episode with Stephanie a long while back, years ago, like 5-6 years ago. It was a special for Sovereign Tech that I was going to release independently. That was about the Book of Enoch. And every time I think about releasing it, I listen to it and I just go, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I want to, but then at the same time, like, I really don't, not that I'm afraid people are going to think I'm crazy. I just don't exactly feel comfortable doing that sort of thing. So if anyone's thinking, wow, he talked about Enochian magic, he should release his Book of Enoch thing. If the day comes where I feel comfortable, I will do it. Okay, I still have it. It's a simple, I forget how long it went, maybe 45, maybe an hour, maybe someday. So don't ask me about that now. Okay. When I feel comfortable, if I ever feel comfortable releasing it, I will do so. But anyway, there you go. There's our review of Castlevania Season 2. Like I said, it is absolutely the best TV show out there right now. Season 2 was tremendous. Totally took what was built on season 1 and just ran with it and took it to all new heights. I expect the same from season 3. There's plenty to get into. Again, the show, even without, I think season 1 had some actual sex to it, even without sex in season 2, which I would have loved. season 3 can bring that in, but it's still, I found it to be really sexy. I loved the buildup of the love story between Trevor and Sypha. I thought that was well done. I wouldn't have minded if there was a love triangle between Sypha, Trevor, and Alucard. That would have been very, very interesting to explore. Maybe we'll get that in season 3. I don't know. They can take this wherever they want. They don't have to stick to the game so much, but I do love that they are bringing in so many elements from the different games within the Castlevania series, because that is a very, no pun intended, storied tradition that only the speakers would be able to really appreciate, I think. So easily, I mean, Castlevania is one of my favorite game series of all time. I'm such a fan. I get the games for whatever console I happen to have. I'm not the biggest fan, I'll admit. I'll just say this quickly. Like, if you're looking to play a more modern Castlevania game, I would stop at what they did for the PlayStation 2, like with Lament of Innocence and the sequel to that, which were great. And there was a great trilogy, actually a tremendous trilogy for the Nintendo DS that I would recommend that you jump on. But that's where I would stop. I really didn't like the Lords of Shadow games, like the newer kind of reboot that was full 3D. That Konami did, and that included Mirrors of Fate and so on. I played them, but and the first one, I mean, it was a good game, but I don't know, it just didn't feel right as like Castlevania. Maybe because I've been playing Castlevania so long, I don't know, it didn't translate well. Like you think of Zelda, where Link translated very well to 64-bit, right, with the Ocarina of Time, and he transferred very well to 3D. Mario did a tremendous job of transferring to 3D. I don't think the Belmonts do such a great job of that. There is a certain style to this. I mean, there's a whole reason that they call these games Metroidvania, right? Because Metroid really started it, more of the open world aspects of this 2D kind of style. But Castlevania is really what in many ways perfected the formula. And of course, Metroid would do a great job of going to 3D with the Metroid Prime series. But yeah, Castlevania, I think, my opinion, really should stick to 2D and should stay there. And it's part of what gives the series its longevity. Or, I mean, even if you want to make it 3D, keep it kind of 2D in aspects like Lament of Innocence wasn't exactly a 3D game, right? Not as the way that you encountered the world so much. Not exactly. So anyway, but yeah, check those out if you really want to play some Castlevania. I wouldn't play like the stuff you could buy on Steam, pretty much. Okay, that's my point. I would stick with the classics, And if you got to I'll tell you, one of the best game systems you can buy right now is you get a PlayStation 2 Slim, put Free McBoot on that thing. Okay, Free McBoot is a software. Get that on a memory card, get that on there, and it turns into like the ultimate gaming machine. And partly because you could also go to like Cool ROMs and you could download Lament of Innocence and a lot of the other games within the Castlevania series. You could get Symphony of the Night. You could get, all this different stuff. And then you could, slap all of the SNES ROMs you want to on a CD, pop that into your PlayStation 2 Slim, use Free McBoot, and you could play all of the, Super Nintendo versions or the Nintendo versions and everything. I mean, it's really the ultimate game system. Even better than a computer in many ways, in my opinion, is the PlayStation 2, with Free McBoot, soft modded on it. So jump on that. But anyway, yeah, Castlevania Season 2. If I'm going to give it a number ranking, whatever the highest is, it gets the highest. If it's 9, if it's out of 10, it gets a 10. If it's out of 5, it gets a 5. The only thing that could make it better, and I'm not going to hold it against it, is if there was like some rampant orgy or something within it. But I'm not going to hold that against it. It doesn't need it. It worked very well, and that the character of Sypha was sexy enough. Fucking A. Anyway, so check it out if you haven't yet. Of course, I kind of spoiled a lot of aspects to it, but there's still so much to see, and I didn't even get into a lot of the jokes and everything that you just have to hear, and you'll fall over laughing. It's so great. So yeah, Castlevania Season 2, check it out. Can't wait for Season 3, and that'll be it for this review episode. I will see all of you, on the other side.